Right now, though, there's a book launched this week called Vanished, True Stories from Families of Australian Missing Persons. The book tells the story of 10 cases of people who, from 1979 through to just a few years ago, just completely and seemingly vanished off the face of the earth. Detailed accounts of what happened, the days that these people were last seen, looking at who they were before they became just faces on missing persons posters and faces looking out at you from a police website, and how their disappearances have impacted on the lives of their families, who don't know to this day if they're dead or alive, what made them leave, if they ran or if they've been abducted, what their fate has been. The pain of not knowing would be impossible to imagine to anyone who hasn't gone down that particular road. The book is written by Niccole Morris. Niccole is also director of the Australian Missing Persons Register and lives in Crow's Nest, and she joins me now. Niccole Morris, good morning, welcome.
Good morning, David. Thank you.
Niccole, firstly, tell me about the Australian Missing Persons Register. What is it?
In 2005, so 18 years ago now, I started the register after seeing a documentary on SBS that highlighted the fact that Australia didn't have a national database for missing persons. So I thought, well, the public should have something that they can access to check on information about missing persons, to learn about them, to not forget them. So I created one. So I made a website, and that is still running today. And then I went on to create the Facebook page, and that has 176,000 followers.
Fantastic thing to do, but is it staggering to you still that was necessary, that this sort of resource didn't already exist, funded by and created by the government or the police, the agency charged with looking for these people?
I think so, but, we're all familiar with government red tape, and I think that's what the case was, because you had to get all of the states working together, and they don't do that very well. So even today, there are still issues. There are still people who aren't on the official government register. So I think I feel that gap, and I do things slightly differently, because it's a very personal connection I have with the families of the missing, and the accounts that I have on my register are as much information as I can find. So you were saying earlier about how we've all seen the faces of the missing on posters, and that's what I try to do. I try to make them not just a face on a missing person poster, but tell people about their whole life and the rich lives that they lived before the day that they went missing and life changed forever.
Before we talk about the cases in the book, why are you in particular, why are you so passionate about this cause?
I think that's a difficult question. I guess it's my nature. I'm curious about human nature. I'm curious about what happens when a person goes missing, and it's not just, I don't just kind of sit there and go, oh, that's sad. I want to know why. And I think there are a lot of people out there that want to know why, and if we know why, maybe we can find them. So I think it's just a curiosity and a compassion. I have a deep compassion for these people. The people in the book have become so familiar to me, and their families have become deep friends of mine, and I think it's that personal connection that I just feel like this is what I was meant to do.
So in terms of putting a story behind these faces and humanising these faces that have been on missing persons posters, in some cases for many, many years, I guess the website, the register is one thing, but writing this book for the 10 cases that you feature in the book, it takes it to a new level, and that must be, it will be incredibly powerful and incredible thing to be involved with. What I want to know is, how did you choose those 10 stories out of all of the, what did we say, thousands of cases that you must be aware of? How did you narrow it down to 10 for this book?
Yeah, 53,000 people a year go missing in Australia, so It's a huge number, but only about 2% of those go on to become long-term missing. I think they're not cases that I would say, I want these cases to be out there. I think it's I had a lot of personal connections with these families, and I looked at the book is really written through the viewpoint of the brothers and sisters of the missing persons in particular. So I looked at cases that had missing person's siblings who had been very instrumental in their cause, so that these were people who really years and years later were still making appeals to the media and still pushing that cause. Please don't forget my brother, please don't forget my sister. So those were the people I chose, the brothers and sisters, and I wanted to tell their story and how their unique relationship with the missing person means that they kept that cause going for years and years. Sometimes after their parents might pass away, they still keep going and they never, ever give up. And these are extraordinary brothers and sisters that I've spoken to in this book. I say in the book, it's a journey that no one wants to undertake, but they all do, without question.
What's out of the 10 cases that you delve into in the book, what's the longest period of case, a period of time that a relative, a brother or sister, has kept up this fight out of those 10?
In the book, there's a case from 1979, and that's two missing 15-year-old girls who went missing from down near Wollongong, and that's Kay Doherty and Tony Kavanagh. And it's very possible that they were really early victims of Ivan Milat, because he was working in the area. He was actually working literally on the road they disappeared from. They were last seen waiting for a bus on a road down in Warilla, and he was working on that road at that time. So it's possible that he might have picked them up and the worst has happened. But it's a very strange case with some strange twists and turns, with and odd letters being sent home to their families after they went missing, although we're not sure those letters were from the girls. And they were just originally treated as runaways, because in 1979 everybody hitchhiked, kids went missing, kids ran away, and that's kind of what the initial police response was. Oh, they're just runaways, and I'm sure they'll turn up. And the disappearances were not taken seriously, which is a tragedy, because they were almost certainly murdered on that night.
And with the letters, I mean, just to delve into that case a little bit more as an example, with the letters that seem strange, but they were, purported to be written by the two girls back home. Were they? Is there any part of the brother or sisters, anything in their mind that thinks that those letters might have been genuine?
It's really difficult to say, and we don't have the letters anymore to check, because today we could forensically test those letters, but they've gone missing, like the girls, unfortunately. And so the reason that Kay's letter in particular, her family doesn't believe was written by her. Tony's family thinks it's possible that it was written by her. Kay's family doesn't, because she excelled in English, and there's a line in this letter that says, "Don't worry, I'm all right," but the right is spelt W-R-I-T-E instead of R-I-G-H-T.
Right. Okay,
and Kay would never have made a mistake like that. So whether that was a coded message to say, I may be saying that I'm all right, but I'm not, or whether that was written by someone else. And her family is very sceptical that it was written by her. And just the content of the letter was, we're fine, we've just gone away to Sydney for a few days with friends, is completely out of character for both of those girls. It wouldn't have happened. They took nothing with them. They had just snuck out to go to a disco in the clothes that they were wearing. These girls didn't just, run away to Sydney for a few days. It just didn't happen.
And particularly the fact, and this is what I'm curious about, as much as, your heart goes out to any relative who is maintaining the fight and to find out and to have some sort of a closure. Is there anything in the back of their minds, and I guess in the 10 cases that you deal with in the book, there would be a wide spectrum of time periods, duration of how long the people have been missing, so therefore what the expectations might be of the family. But in most cases, are the relatives holding out some sort of actual definite faint hope that they may still be alive, or are they just looking for closure, and a closing of the story as to what exactly happened?
I think it varies, and even within the families it varies. Some of the brothers and sisters I spoke to said, there's no way my sister's coming home. some of them said, some of the same family said, oh yeah, I still think that they could be out there, and they still look for these people in crowds. So I think it depends on the circumstances of the person, whether there was a strong indication that they might have taken their own life or they are victims of foul play. I'm pretty sure that Kay Doherty's twin brother Kevin does not hold out hope that she is still alive. But then there are cases like Marcia Ryan might have just decided to completely change her life. And Richard Leap went to possibly live among the homeless in Sydney, so he may still be out there. And so I think with missing persons, it's that ambiguous loss. It's you've lost the person, but there is still that faint glimmer of hope that just maybe they might walk in the door again. But for most of the families of very long-term missing persons, they don't have that hope. They just want to know what happened. And there's a quote that I use quite often when I talk about missing persons. It was the mother of a woman who is still missing in Sydney, but her husband was convicted of her murder, in Victoria. And she said, you know what, I'd settle for bones. And that is heartbreaking that she knows that she won't get her daughter back, but she just wants to lay her to rest. And most of the families feel the same way.
Because I haven't been in that situation, touch wood, and I cannot even imagine what it would be like. But I would imagine that, like most people, your level of optimism fluctuates, not even just day by day, but even part of day by part of day, depending on your mood. So that constant wavering between, oh, I know she's dead, hang on, there might be a chance that she's alive. What does that do to someone to fluctuate like that day after day, year after year? I cannot even imagine.
Exactly, and it is that is exactly what it's like. Sometimes they're okay, sometimes they think, no, this is hopeless. But that's the thing with brothers and sisters. They can't give up because it's family. It's their brother and sister, and they know that their brother or sister would do the same for them. They would just keep on hoping and keep. And there were a couple of families who originally agreed to be in the book, and then they came back to me and said, no, you know what, we can't do this. It's too hard. It's too emotional, and that's fine. Because you're asking people to describe the worst thing that's ever happened to them, and sometimes that's just too hard. I really commend the families that did agree to keep going with this process, and they're so happy that the family's name is still getting out there.
If you've just come in, having a chat to Niccole Morris this morning. Niccole is director of the Australian Missing Persons Register. She lives in our part of the world. She lives in Crow's Nest, but she's also just launched this week her first book, which is the stories of 10 cases of Australian missing persons, the true stories from the families of those missing persons, the stories of what happened in the lead up to these people disappearing and who they were as people. The book is called Vanished. Niccole, just lastly, I'm nearly out of time, but what do you want people to take away from reading this book? What's the aim?
I think what people have been surprised about is the level of detail that the families have to go through. It's not just the grief and the loss that they're dealing with, but they also have to deal with the practicalities of having a missing person. They have to keep paying their mortgages or their car payments, and they have to make those phone calls to their employer to say, oh, you know what, my sister didn't come home, but please don't sack her. Can you just keep the job open for a little while so we know what's going on? And there comes a point where they have to say, okay, something's happened, they're not coming back. And so there's all of that the general public probably don't think about all the time. But as you were saying before about the Everest trek for mental health services, I'd really like to highlight the fact that a lot of people who do go missing are having a mental health crisis, and the funding is not there and the services are not there in Australia. So I think the Everest trek is fantastic. And that needs to be really highlighted, that we need to really provide mental health services to prevent more people from going missing.
It's a really good point, isn't it? Because, you think about all these cases, you think, well, they couldn't be. If they've been missing for that long as some of the cases that you deal with in this book, then inevitably, as horrible and tragic as it is to say this, they must be dead. But then if you weave the mental health issue into the equation, people can people find it hard to disappear these days, to completely, take away any evidence that they were there, because of so much of our lives are electronic, and there's so many ways of tracking people. But if someone, for a start, either forgets or just in their mind doesn't want to go back and doesn't see the need to alert their family, and they're living on the streets, I suppose it could happen. That's a really good point, isn't it?
Absolutely, and that has happened. We've had people come back after years. So I never close that door ever, and I go by what the families believe has happened to them.
Nicole, I appreciate your time. It sounds like a sobering but compelling read. It's called Vanished: True Stories from the Families of Australian Missing Persons. I wish you the best of luck with it, and a pleasure to have a chat to you this morning.
Thank you very much, David.